Harry.
Being recorded by the Zoom.
There we go, got it. Am I about to speak? I think that's the case. Jacques, thank you very much for that introduction. I'm in wondrous company with Whitman. I think I might just as well switch off and go home now. Oh, except that I am at home. That's the problem. It's not going to be easy to do it. But thank you for that. You're quite right that most of my poems are inspired by the natural world. It's something I'm very, very passionate about. So you're going to be hearing quite a lot of poems this evening about that, or including that. I hope it's not going to bore you too much. It's not all about the natural world, and it's not all pretty stuff, but it affects me profoundly, and I feel deeply that we need to protect what little of it we have left. And for me, I've always felt this way about the natural world, but since going in 2007, which I'll tell you about now, to the Eastern Cape, I think that is something that is a place that is just beyond ever being allowed to disappear. It's just a wonderful, wonderful natural environment. So here we go. The first poem I'm going to read, the two poems, these are from 2007, and they are my reaction, or part of my reaction, when I first went to the Eastern Cape. I was told that I would probably hate it, that it wasn't like leafy Cheshire, and indeed it isn't like leafy Cheshire, but I loved it immediately. And these two poems, for me, they were just things that I had to write about at the time. The first one was when I first encountered a squadron of hadidars. The first morning I think I was there, and these things came over like strafing jet fighters, screeching at me, and I thought I was going to die of a heart attack. Hadidar. Certainly not posh. No Knightsbridge or Bath. No golden Regency crescent. No plum. Not la-di-da, but the bleakest raw screech, primordial as swamp, one step up from reptile. Real. Less pretty by far than rosellas and fairy wrens ripe for picturing, but heavy, squat, and chucked together with blocks of rusty parts, a spare Concorde snout, propped. Like so much of here, shacks and townships, tires, tin, and cardboard, half a forest balanced on each woman's head, held proud, still, elegant as models. Hadidar, this beautiful bird. Ugly, rough, unfinished, true. And the second poem was when I returned home to England, as England was home for me then, briefly, and having visited Grahamstown. And if you know Grahamstown, you'll know the long high street with the Rhodes University at one end, the cathedral halfway down, and then beyond it are the townships, and you can see them. I wrote this poem after having been in the senior common room at Rhodes, looking down that way and being aware for the first time in my life of something of what other people have to put up with. I went back to England, and almost the first thing that I saw, the first morning I was out walking, there was this beautiful big emperor dragonfly, blue and black, on a bush, hanging from a leaf on a bush. Emperor. We gaze at one another along the axis of the town, opposites. Blue, black, a living string of gosso beads, tight and sleek as Meccano. You hang from this leaf in sunlight, dependent as dreadlocks, a poem waiting to be plucked, ripe as a blackberry. Sharper than metallic ores, my emperor, you press yourself from prehistory into England's now, razoring the breeze like a pendulous jewel, silver moons, coal black skies, as across our worlds we stare at one another, air, earth, turquoise, jet, water, fire. So that was me at the start of things. I'm going to read you a bit now from Thicket. This is my latest. I don't know, is it back to front for you? I don't know what it is, but it's called Thicket, Shades from the Eastern Cape. And a new start was made for me many years after that, when I was walking on the beach at Cinsa East, vast empty beach. The book begins with what some people have been kind enough to call a prose poem about this event. I'm just going to read you the first little piece of it and then move on to poems. Cardiac event, Wednesday. Strangers, how quickly they are not. How a moment, wholly unpredictable, unanticipated, changes people you have never met, never truly thought about, from strangers into lifesavers, into friends. A gull shakes something, mollusk, fish, into breakfast in the surf's shallows. Sand crabs sprint in panic for their burrows, rattling sideways like frantic clockwork toys. There's a cumulonimbus meringue of cloud gathering on the horizon as sun-blessed rollers crashed ashore, and I stride along the beach, blissfully unaware, alone, contented. And then, having turned for home again, the wait begins, a leaden discomfort like nothing I have felt before. I think I know what the boulder expanding in my chest might be, but refuse to acknowledge it. Such things happen to others, not to me. Ignore, keep walking. It will go away. It doesn't. And so it begins. That was in Cinsa. I'll come back to Cinsa. But the next few poems are from our wonderful indigenous garden in Grahamstown, filled with big trees. RJ, I know, has visited there and she knows what it was like. We sat on the stoop and drank wine or drank coffee. Or RJ, here's to you. Bliss. Semi-deciduous. A soft apologetic drizzle has set in, or is trying to, as autumn sneaks into the lockdown days. Somewhere, a hoopoe pipes mournfully like a small child humming itself to sleep, and an avian lethargy, almost an absence, droops from damp trees. It's hard to know what to do, or rather it's hard to rouse myself to do any of the myriad things that need to be done. It's that sort of time. 3 or 4 days unshaven now. I'm developing the kind of elderly yuppie stubble that once young women found attractive, sexy in their men, but in me is sad evidence that I'm slowly becoming a scruffy old git, running to seed, much like the garden. How's it all going to end? With my death, perhaps, from boredom? With all our deaths? Ramblings about reviving the economy, that all of this was a hoax, no worse than a bad flu season, dismay me. Yet autumn is this slowing down toward winter's halt, leaves shed, days short, a rest and recovery without which there will be no spring, no new growing. Observe, I am this garden, semi-deciduous, a once fresh image, rotting to the old cliche. No decay, no compost, no death, no life, no now, no tomorrow, no soon. During this time, and obviously that was when the lockdown was going on for COVID. But at the same time, there's a huge and years-long drought in the Eastern Cape, a killing drought. Water was hardly ever seen. Mind you, in Grahamstown, even though the drought is now over, people don't see much water in their taps anyway because the municipality doesn't know how to work them. But that's political aside, forgive me. Drought. Shirtless for once, because the sun is switched off, he steps outside. Something growls as if warning him away, but that's all it is, no imminent attack. There may or may not be a storm. Probably not, he thinks, but the air's hot, dense, a touch fanatical, and its burgeoning fever needs to break soon. Still high summer, but the trees believe it's autumn, sacrificial leaves falling to crisp brown drifts in the dust. Their world sags, kneels for pardon, reprieve, or the axe. Endurance is the only virtue left. Where are those frogs that bake themselves for years in Kalahari sand, dreaming of that sacred kiss of rain, of resurrection, when all the sleeping beauties awaken? He is no prince, but knows it will happen. It must come. Just hold on. Just hold on. An intimacy of scorched earth. Hoopoe, this striking African monarch, flicks his chestnut wings up from the lawn's parched straw and departs. An olive thrush bounces through the sour orange's discarded leaf litter, but my pen hardly cares to record such things, so alien is cool air. After last night's rain, the first for months, here's a green tumescence, a straightening of the world's shoulders, an audible gasping, momentary pause. Resuscitation, no doubt, however brief. No fire, no persecution, no hungry flame. Not yet, not yet. I lie down, face and nose rough upon the soil's prickling stubble, attracted by its itching, rooted musk of personage, sun sneaking through the clouds, hot on my shirt. And I wish this marriage of dry earth and sky every success, a match struck in heaven. But for now, their arduous relationship speaks of neglect, pain, punishment, of cruel abuse. They can't separate, no question of divorce. How far they have journeyed together. Nothing will ever change except the weather, nowhere to go. And suffering's part of the deal, isn't it? Love so commonly sears. An unlubricated drongo rattles in the fig tree amid flurries of early leaf fall. The hoopoe has vanished. This garden, full of big trees, was a wondrous place. I just loved it. We don't live there anymore, I'm afraid, but it's still very much present in my mind, in my imagination. I used to go out even at night onto the stoop, where there were sounds and rustlings, all sorts of things going on out there. And for years and years and years, there was one sound that repeated itself every night, was constant. It went beep, 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 beep. And I thought, what is that bird? What sort of owl is that beeping at me? And occasionally I'd just see it, a grey shape just flitting, sometimes beeping as it went. For 10 years, I didn't know what it was. And then I had the brainwave of putting a recording of this sound on Facebook and asking anybody who knew what it is. And my friend Harold Guess at Rhodes University got back to me very quickly and said, that's not a bird, that's a bat. That's a male epauletted fruit bat. And that is its cry to attract mates. And I watched Googled a little video of it. And it's epauletted because it has little white marks on its shoulders. And when it beeps, and it beeps all the time, it goes beep, beep, beep. And the epaulets go up and down. I thought, what is this? But it was wonderful to know what it is. The problem was, I'd already written this poem called Nightbird. No idea who or what you are, but we do know that you are, beeping metronome of the night air, heartbeat of these last 10 years, fleeting sonar of the deep trees. All the dark nows are one, as this is every now that ever was. Bird, 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 bird. All that you call bird is as nothing until at last you're known. Grey ghost, grey bird, chime, chime, chime. We will always hear you. Anyway, you will remember that the lockdown days were horrible times and all the rest of it. But for me, sometimes I almost felt at times that what we'd had before wasn't so wonderful, not so much to write home about. This poem is called Waiting for Normality. We don't just, excuse me, I'll start again. We don't see the moth, just taste the flutter. Downy voice of a nightjar quivers through the gathering dusk, and 3 tiny bats spin insect wings about the trees, a shift of warm breeze like some restless animal rousing itself, So far, so far, so far. And a watchful calm persists, landscape breathing all around us. Silver scales of a crescent moon claim the air, where now a single fruit bat, late for harvest, flaps from the fig tree. And limbo, limbo, we shuffle between Earth and the 21st century amid a life we've imagined and the one we get, until normality returns. That damaged, toxic smear of life we've grown accustomed to, like some smoker's phlegmy hack, wheezing out our only remaining pleasure, sneering like a mad urban harpy, slowly, painfully, wasting us all away. And on the same theme, La Corona. Did you know there's a Mexican beer called La Corona? Means the crown, of course. And you couldn't get it in the shops during the coronavirus epidemic because people didn't want to drink it. They thought it would give them a disease. Anyway, this is La Corona. The earth comes fighting back, and who can blame her? Sooner or later, all bullies must be faced down, confronted by their own inadequacy, while each victim, pinned in her bloody corner, at last comprehends the callous truth and bites. Hence storms, floods, fires, quakes, hence this disease. Do I discern, hidden here beneath the vast green embrace of a wild fig, the faintest hint of a smile? An "I told you so" shrug. Don't say you weren't warned, rejoinder. We deserve it, certainly, but somehow no, I don't think so. Much more a deep sadness, regret, frustration. Frustration that we've shown ourselves so maladroit. These ants swarm on, innocent, oblivious, harming no one, while we sprawl from catastrophe to disaster, Hades to hell every day. Fight back, sweet world, and who will fault you? I certainly won't. I'm going back to Cinsa now, the beach, that big beach, which is where I had my cardiac event. Euphemism rattles around such things. The beach, if you know it, is huge, vast, and for the most part, most of the year, nobody's on it, or virtually nobody is on it. The waves rush in and big, huge sand dunes at the back of the beach. And I used to walk down there quite a lot and find a place hidden away in the sand dunes just to sit and to ruminate and perhaps sometimes to write. This day was a windy day, hot and sunny, but the wind was blowing, so all the sand was blowing fiercely. Anyway, almanac. Someday, you too will sit here in warm sun, listening to the soft song of the waves and sharing the dunes' pulse. It will restore you, no question about that. And when you do, please remember me, though we haven't met, and despite the fact you've never heard of me. Now, like you, I'm retrieving someone else whose name I haven't grasped, but whose spirit is all around. I linger here for her, for him, and this is good. In fact, it's everything. A lone black-backed gull drifts silently by, cruising the strand. Nothing disquiets him. Walking home, head down into a stiff breeze, I sense billions of untold lifetimes winnowing through me, towards, within, shaded multitudes of our ancestors, the beach, their almanac. Then stir to find I've mislaid my notebook, must turn my face, retrace the hours, the days, the years, keep step with these gaunt spectral grains of stinging sand, sprinting into a past I've barely left, until I spot it, forlorn and flapping, somewhere athwart our timeline, desperate to be found. Someday, you too will read this. And one very short poem about Cinsa. You probably gathered that it was a very important place to me, still is. Beautiful, many moods, many moods. That was one, the wind and the hot sand, but many moods. And this was another one. Cinsa. Out toward the horizon, the sky is a pen and ink sketch on pewter. Everything is still. Above the ocean's warm murmur swells evening's silver dissension of cicada song. A pause, and off it goes again. Absolutely no breeze, as if day must waft oozing into gelatinous night. How I love this place. I too am leaching into it. There is no sky now, only a gentle inching grey of cloud like a lid. Nothing else moves. Other parts of the Eastern Cape have affected me greatly. Two of those I'm going to read now. One is inspired by a little venture into a place called Waters Meet or Waters Meeting, right next to the little village of Bathurst. We went, a couple of us, in a battered old car down this track. It's very remote, it's very dry, it's very Eastern Cape, it's very Thicket. And this is a true story. Cobra. Halfway along a rutted dirt track, down to where waters meet, salt to fresh, the car bumping and rattling slowly through dry heat and sand, we jerk to a sudden shocked halt. No zebra this, but a huge snake crossing, dust ochre and deliberate. Cobra. Not especially hurried, no interest in me. He goes about his fixed business of searching for a mate. It's breeding time, and Thicket is doubtless where he'll find her. No hint of threat perceived or offered, no hood or cape, no venom load, no death. This is exactly where he's meant to be, at home. It's we who trespass, intrude, we who meddle, yet he leaves us untouched. Whether from respect or fear, I cannot move. Then breathe once more, relieved, quaking, creep on in first gear, dust stirring. But wait, break, break! 10 meters farther, 15. She too glides, but from the other side of the path, equally unperturbed, at least by me, so sure of her beauty, leading him on. Is she smiling? I could think so. Does she watch him brave the dance floor? Does she flirt? Of course she does, as he, hapless devotee, trails in her wake, bemused, befuddled, enthralled to the same erotic music that I, decades past, heard and hummed beneath the trees. Midway along this rutted dirt road, down to where the waters meet, all our knowledge becomes serpent. I went back there not so long ago, hoping to see the cobra again, but no luck, no luck. The other poem from the middle of the Eastern Cape, or my part of the Eastern Cape, was where a place I went called the Cap River. Beautiful, unspoiled. I suppose it's a tributary of the Great Fish. It's very close to the Great Fish River. And I went with my friend Shane Engelbrecht down. The poem's called Riparian, for Shane. We scramble and slither down the kloof trail to a place where 2 canoes lie quietly waiting, upended on a rack above the reed-clad river. This is where you start to write yourself, braille of the riverbank, scrawl of the wild. Silence on the water is filled with psalm of paddle, splash, breeze whisper. White-breasted cormorants stiller than branches, giant kingfishers direct as bullets across the sun, holt and heron, raven and kite, river and sky. Easing upstream through rushes, lily pads, dragonflies, silt. Entwined as we are in these lost words for wilderness our children no longer hear about in their cults of Instagram and cheap celebrity, we feel at peace. Then, deep in the shade of overhanging boughs, we clamber ashore to be embraced by a forest far older than either of us, than both, than any, than all. We enter by the ancient riparian stoop of Eden. Untamed, enfolded, We breathe the good earth again, its fig and burrabeen, yellowwood, cycad, wild plum sending down living roots. Civet, duiker, waterbuck print out their welcome in the cap's mud. Otters confer a gift of shells as we too rest here, leaving only our thanks. I've got 4 more poems. I hope I have time for 4 more poems. I often, I'm a bit of a pedant. I have to confess, I'm a bit of a pedant. And sometimes things are said or things are written and they annoy me. People say, oh, that's very unique. Sorry, what? Unique means one of a kind. It can't be very unique. It can't be nearly unique. It's either unique or it isn't. And people seem to think, well, this poem's called Unique. Clouds spill in from the west ahead of that promised cold front, driven by a rough, temperamental breeze. Their shapes never existed before, will never exist again, yet everyone, everywhere recognizes them for what they are, clouds. This is what unique means. The word has less to do with difference, whatever people may say, than with something we have always known to be true, a qualified, modulated likeness, the whole world as uniquely various as fingerprints, as DNA, as zebra stripes, as clouds. Right, we're no longer in the Western Cape. Oh, sorry, we're no longer in the Eastern Cape. We are in the Western Cape now. Audrey, you can go away now if you want to. I don't want to offend your sensibilities as I've done once before. It's lovely. We live in a little village called Kylemore near Stellenbosch, and it's beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous. But when I first came here, leaving the Eastern Cape behind was a pretty difficult thing for me to do because it had become so much a part of my life, so much part of who I am, and it remains that way. I have to say it remains that way. This poem was one of the first I wrote here. It's called Plastic Grass. Best for the environment, the agents claim. No need to water astroturf, no weeds, no snails or herbicides. It's eco-friendly, no shit. I see, I say. They've come to tell me that the neighbours have chosen to carpet their plot with fake turf, and now must find a quick way to dispose of the bothersome soil, filled as it is with worms and bugs nobody has any use for. Except for me, that is. I welcome things that breathe. Yes, I say, I'll take it. A Luddite, of course. What did you expect? My history of tadpoles, sticklebacks, I spy pond life, collections of wildflowers, birds' eggs, and sand lizards makes me that child lost deep in thicket or amongst the dunes where stoats, bats, and badgers lurk, where adders hide. So me, yes, I'll use it. For I'm wizard, heretic, oddball, a maverick, deviant, not to be trusted. I'm that savant nutcase filled with acorns, dreams, and conkers, one whose tweetings inhabit hedgerows, not boardrooms or lifeless plastic twitterscapes where nothing ever ripens. Oh yes, I say at once, we'll take it. Tip it here. And a young bloke in a bucky hauls it through, has his men strew loam upon our meagre patch of barren ground. Seems happy they don't have to drive it to the dump. He's pleased enough with this, and so am I. Hey, look, young man, do you see it? That spider? No? Okay then, just leave the earth here for me. 2 more. Incidentally, if anybody's interested, I now have a website. You're welcome to have a look at that if you want to. It's simple enough, harryowen.co.za, and please do get in touch with me if you want to, through that, or just my email is on there as well. 2 poems left. This one I haven't read before. In fact, neither of these last 2 have I read before. The first one is called Seduction. And I suppose it echoes some of the things I've been saying in earlier poems. Seduction. Cloud plumes feather the evening sky. whispering in haze each scanty flock of vapour, voices soft as rainfall, sultry as a smiling invitation. They summon unfledged days, aching for approval, joining in, being the same, cursing like a roughneck, everyone's mate, the constant crony. Today, of course, I'm happy to be different. Gangs of rowdy lads, suggestive girls don't interest me. Too old, it's true. But even now, I yearn for passion, acceptance, hard loving, with mountain, desert, aardvark, whale, by river, thicket, storm, and ocean, pink clouds, sleek as lingerie, calling in 1,000 liquid dialects from skies as flagrant as this one. And the last poem I'm going to read is for our new granddaughter. She's just 3 months old. Her name is Leah, L-I-A, Leah. She's actually not my biological granddaughter. She's the daughter of Chrissy's son, and Chrissy and I are married for the second time. But she feels like my granddaughter. She is my granddaughter, and she's a delight, an absolute delight. When she first came into the world, and I was terrified to hurt her picking her up, she was just lovely. But she had feet that were too big for her. The toes seemed long and prehensile. She's grown into them, of course, since then. But it was strange. I thought, you don't look so much like a little girl. You look more like a bird. And that bird is the jacana, the African jacana, which has long feet with which it walks on floating vegetation. It looks as though it's walking on water. So some people call it the Jesus bird. It doesn't, of course, but little Leah is jacana to me. Here she is. And with this, I'll leave you. Thank you very much for being here. I really do appreciate you having come along, and I hope you've enjoyed it. And let's hear something from you in the second half, maybe. Jacana for Leah. Heavens acclaim the Jesus bird because he descends to walk on water. Not true, of course, but watch him slip 2 elegant feet, toes slim as pencils between lily pads, kissing the surface like a benediction. He's delicate as air, miracle enough, no need for sacred marvels. Yet here you are, Leah, tiny bird, water dancing spirit. Africa has borne you, so where better now to blossom than this lily pond? Along the trail, brash guinea fowl, golden weavers, a spiraling buzzard applaud your birth. Cheeping miracle, new hatched jacana, they call. Welcome to our world of song and sunlit wonders. Thank you and good night.
Harry, that was a wonderful reading. Would everyone like to unmute and give a round of applause?
I'm very touched. Thank you very much.
It's going to.
I don't know what to say except thank you. I mean, it's so wonderful to know that people love poetry. And I know so many of you are poets, and I love your poetry as well. But it's just a wonder sometimes to me that so many feel good about poetry of the natural world, and that to me is an absolute essential. I can't imagine ever writing without, in the back of my mind at least, that natural world being there. So thank you for your support. I appreciate it greatly.
It's amazing. I think Melissa's going to take us further into Q&A, and after a short break into open mic. So I'm stepping back for that. It's been lovely. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacques. I do appreciate all you've said and your support. You're a good mate.
All right, so anybody who's got a question for Harry is welcome to pop up and raise your hand on Zoom, or wave at me, or unmute yourself. If you have any comments about the reading or questions about Harry's writing approach or anything like that. We've got a question from Georgia to start us off.
Hi there. Hello. That was absolutely wonderful. Harry, thank you so much for and to hear a collection all about a world that you know, the natural world was just such a treat. It was absolutely wonderful. Loved every minute of it. And it was lovely to inhabit some of those spaces, the African spaces again, the Southern African spaces, especially with those birds, all of the birds that you mentioned, I love dearly. And, you know, sort of squirming in my chair because you're talking about the bats and I loved it. And I wanted to ask you, I'm curious about, I mean, it's obvious that there's a sort of a salvation that happens. And I could hear that when you were talking about the places that you visit and inhabiting these spaces and allowing these places to talk to you. There's really this, you know, well, it's my experience too. You know, there is a part of me that is saved every time I'm able to just be there. And then you mentioned, I can't remember which poem it was, I'm sorry, but it was, you talked about retrieving someone else. And then it was the unknown becoming known. And to me, it felt like through the presence of the place or through the bird or through the beach or through the inhabiting of that space. And then you followed somewhere else to writing yourself, you know, that thing of writing, you know, being in a place and somehow you are writing. And I just wondered if you wanted to say something more about that, specifically about the retrieving someone else.
It's a mystical thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
But thank you first of all for your comments. It's very kind of you to say those things. But I often feel when I'm out in, I was going to say the wilderness, most of the wild places are not true wilderness anymore. But when I'm alone out in places like that, I don't feel alone. I feel that there's something speaking. I'm not religious, so I'm not talking about a religious sense at all here, but there's something spiritual about it. It's as if there are languages, there are words, there are vocabularies in the natural world that are somehow trying to speak to me or trying to remind me that there are things to be found there. And I just want to go looking for them. I don't feel, it's not a game of hide and seek. It's a question of trying to immerse myself in something which I just love being immersed. It's like a warm bath. And for me, it's not I'm in it, but I am it. Does that sound too fanciful? But it makes, I feel as though I'm part of it. And it's like you, all of you this evening coming here and supporting me. I feel that the natural world supports me and it's giving me something much more than I can give in trying to put words to it. And I just love it. I just love it. I can't be more precise than that, I'm afraid.
That's all beautiful answer. Thank you, Harry. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Then we'll head over to Leslie next before load shedding.
Thank you, Harry. I mean, that was, I think, probably the most beautiful lyrical evocation of nature that I've ever heard. And I really felt it in my belly. And I know that that's how you experience that immersion with being in, and just brilliant. I mean, each of those poems I'd want to hear over and over again and just experience the poem. Thank you. I'll have to get
thank you. Thank you so much for that. It's true, isn't it? But what's wonderful is that there are other people who can respond to it. I just read. When you write, you don't know if anybody will ever read what you've written or will care, even if they find it. And so to hear people say what you've written actually means something to me means a lot. It means a lot, but not so much to me as an individual, but for the thing that we're celebrating, which is the wild world that we hope to continue to inhabit. So thank you very much. Thank you, Leslie.
All right, then next up, we've got a hand from Jacques.
So I suppose I want to ask about what happens when you try to do this almost impossible thing of putting what you experience in the natural world, when you try to put that into words. And what I felt is this beautiful dance that you do with what you describe, because you bring it closer, but then every now and then, especially with the creatures, you bring it closer, like you don't quite humanize it, but it's the snakes, falling in love and being befuddled, and is she smiling, and that, and then the next moment you feel the otherness of those things again. You feel how utterly different they are, and that dance fascinates me. I don't know if you want to say something about that. Are you aware? Obviously you're aware of that as you write, but it's very familiar, and then it's also strange.
Yeah, thank you, Jacques. I hope what I don't do is just anthropomorphize.
No, I didn't feel that at all.
That's something I would feel awkward about and unhappy with.
Mm-mm.
But yeah, I mean, the very fact that these things I feel so strongly are a part of me, and I am a part of them, and our world binds us. Those are the things that somehow produce words. When I go out, people say, well, what's your writing process? When I go out walking, I don't go out to write poems. I do have a notebook with me. And when I go out there, I just write stuff, just write it. It's not poems. It's not planned or meant to be poems. Whatever comes into my head when I stop and sit on a rock or something, I just write it. And later, it may or may not, I may go back to it later. It's important to leave it alone for a while. And you come back to it later and you think, okay, there's something there that I can do something with, this phrase or that word or that line or that idea. And you can put it in juxtaposition with something else that may have come from an entirely different time. That cobra, for example, it was that I wasn't thinking when I was watching those snakes about the book of Genesis but the last line or two somehow felt right to make that connection. The serpent in the Garden of Eden. So it happens, or it doesn't happen. And more often than not, it doesn't happen. I've written an awful lot of crap, I have to tell you. But what you hope for is that within all of that, you will find something that's worth keeping. And that's the way I go about it.
What's lovely is how it makes me feel is that the poems are important. They're immensely important, but the kind of attention that you are paying while you're out there or in there is even more important. The quality of that attention.
It's funny you should say that. I mean, that's Mary Oliver, isn't it? Mary Oliver says she doesn't know how to pray, but she does know how to pay attention. And I think that paying attention, even if it's an unconscious paying attention, is something that you either have or do or don't have or do. I know a lot of people who walk with me and we go out and I'll be looking at something and they'll just walk straight past it, won't see it, won't want to see it. What's that? Actually, it's a buzzard. And they look at me, oh, it's a bird. No more than that. So I think it is, you're right, it's about paying attention. But I'm happy to pay attention. It's what makes such times work for me.
Lower hand pressure, left windows.
Thank you. It's lovely.
Order. Zoom meeting.
Thank you, Jacques. Do we have any other questions from the audience? While other people are thinking, I really appreciated the way you read. It was very emotive and just enthralling. Like, I can tell you're a storyteller as well as being a poet. And these poems told their stories by the way you read them. So I'm curious, is this something that comes naturally to you, or do you practice to make an effort to read your poems in this vibrant way? How is that for you?
I was a teacher in secondary education for 30 odd years of my life, and you can't do that and survive without being some sort of actor. You have to be able to perform just to stay alive. And the fact that I'm still alive, I suppose, has something to do with that ability. It's funny actually reading online to a screen, because usually I'm in front of a live audience. I like that. I like the interaction, and people interrupt you, or they say something, or you see somebody's face changes, and you can adapt to all of that. I love that. So if what I do here, I'm just sitting down. Normally I'm standing up and I'm moving around. I'm doing all sorts of things. But if something of that comes through, even while I'm sitting down, I'm happy with that. I think it's nice. Thank you.
I definitely think it came through. All right, then we've got a question from Felelani.
Good evening. Yes, so thank you very much, Harry. Hey, I'll say I was very lucky to attend your book launch in McGregor in November. And exactly as I've said, you know, storytelling is clearly in your wiring, because one of the things that I noticed was to say, I enjoyed the poetry, but I also enjoyed the narration when you introduce these poems, the stories behind the poems. It was like, I would be like, you know, love to see a session where we just listen to you telling about the stories about the poems. It's so beautiful. The imagery and everything into it, but also how it reflects the connection, because we have this thing of saying it's us and the nature. You know, the nature is there and then it's us. But in your poetry, I find the extension, whereby we are the extension. I'm an extension of a tree, and a tree is an extension of me, you know, how it reflects. But no, it's more of a compliment in terms of your beautiful work. Thank you very much.
Felelani, thank you very much. Thank you. You're a wonderful poet in your own right. So to hear those kinds of words coming from somebody of your quality, I think is magnificent. Thank you for that. I'll continue to try to do what I hope is working. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions or comments from our audience? Otherwise, Harry, do you want to share where people can find your book or books to buy?
Well, yeah, actually, the latest one is the one I showed you, which is Thicket, where most of the poems I read tonight come from. It was published just a few months ago by Minimal Press in Cape Town. You can go to minimalpressbooks.co.za and look at things through that if you want to. You can go to my website, which may or may not, that link may or may not work, but certainly my email will. And if you want to get in touch with me, heo@hotmail.co.uk, which you can find on my website, please just get in touch with me and we'll make an arrangement. If you want one of the books, we'll find a way to get it to you. I hope you will, because I've enjoyed this book and it means a lot to me. It's really gratifying to me to hear people say that you've enjoyed it as well. Thank you all for that.
Thank you. I've popped that link in the chat, as well as the link to Harry's website I shared earlier when he shared that.
Am I to be released from my bonds now?
Seems like it. No one else wants to grill you. It was a very light. Thank you so much for sharing with us tonight and being here.
I enjoyed it immensely. Thank you for having me.